Maine State Chamber of Commerce co-host the debate. It's about 50 minutes.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm News Center Maine's Pat Callaghan. Tonight, in conjunction with the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, we present a Voice of the Voter forum with the 4 candidates for U.S. Senate in Maine. Nearly 300,000 Mainers have already cast ballots in this election, but many more will do so with either early and absentee voting or at the polls on November 3rd. So this is an opportunity to try to get some clarity about the candidates and where they stand. Now, we had planned to hold this forum in person, and we're set up to do so at the Holiday Inn by the Bay in Portland, where the Chamber is holding its annual dinner tonight. However, with the Senate still in session, Senator Susan Collins cannot attend in person. When we shared that news with the other candidates, we were told by Sara Gideon's campaign that she would not appear in person if Senator Collins did not. So for that reason and for technical concerns, we have moved to a virtual gathering. Our candidates tonight in alphabetical order: Republican incumbent Susan Collins, the Democrat Speaker of the Maine House Sara Gideon, and Independents Max Linn and Lisa Savage. For the next hour, I'm going to be posing questions to the candidates. Each will have 1 minute to answer, and follow-up discussion will be at my discretion. Each candidate will have an opportunity to ask a question of another candidate with the same time limit applying, and each candidate will have 1 minute for a closing statement. So welcome to you all. Senator Collins, I'll begin with you. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has, among other things, blocked consideration of extensive pandemic relief bills and has rushed confirmation of a Supreme Court nominee, things you have disagreed with. The Washington Post reports that McConnell counseled the White House not to strike a deal on a relief bill with Speaker Pelosi before the election, partly because it might interfere with the planned confirmation of Judge Barrett next week to the Supreme Court. Why do you still support Leader McConnell for your party, and does he make it harder to find bipartisan solutions?
Well, Pat, first let me thank you and the Chamber for sponsoring this debate tonight. I support another COVID relief package, and indeed, we've had 2 votes this week. One on my bill to extend the Paycheck Protection Program, which has already saved 250,000 jobs in the state of Maine, and another $500 billion package that was far broader. I think it's unfortunate that although my bill got 57 votes, it didn't get the 60 that were needed, despite the fact that there is near unanimous support for that program and having a second round. So it was Mitch McConnell who brought both those bills to the floor. I disagree with his position on having negotiations continue and a bill brought to the floor before the election. I think that that is important. Obviously, I'm not going to agree with any leader all of the time, but I don't hesitate to make my disagreements known.
All right, Speaker Gideon, your backers like to point out how many times the senator has supported President Trump and Mitch McConnell with her votes. But we've heard from viewers about this. Won't you do the same thing if Joe Biden is president and Chuck Schumer is majority leader? Is it only Republicans who need to vote differently from their party leaders?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for tuning in and thank you for hosting us. So this is an important question, and I think in order to answer it, people can look back on my record in the State House. In fact, I became a leader in the State House in just my second term because I knew there were directions that we needed to go in, ways that we needed to be listening to the people of Maine and taking action. And that's what we did, whether it was around the climate crisis, whether it was around protecting healthcare or lowering the cost of prescription drugs. Now, in the Senate, that is exactly what people can expect from me as somebody who is representing us here in Maine. But I want to go back to the question that you asked Senator Collins, because you asked her why would she support Mitch McConnell when he continues to do these things. And this gets to the very crux of what is happening here, because Mitch McConnell will continue to be majority leader as long as Susan Collins is a senator. And that means all of the issues that we care about, whether it is healthcare, whether it is what happens with the judiciary, will be at risk.
All right, and I want to ask Max Linn and Lisa Savage, the Independents. Max first, which party would you caucus with in the Senate and why?
Well, I've been asked that question before, and thank you all here tonight. I'm looking forward to having a great conversation. And at its core, Pat, at its core, the reason I'm in this race is to represent Mainers. And I argue with Speaker Gideon's last comment that she's going to represent Maine. She can't, because she's with a rigged system. And what I've tried to convey to all the voters irrelevant of who I caucus with. Who I will caucus with is who does the most for Maine. I can truly be independent in Washington. Speaker Gideon and Senator Collins cannot. They belong to a rigged, broken system. And the core of me running in this race has been the American people and Mainers sick and tired of politics as usual in Washington, D.C. I offer the alternative from the career politicians to the citizen legislator, from the institutional magnitude of Washington and politics as usual for something different. And so I would assure you, I would be able to caucus with either party, whoever does the most for Maine. To me, it's immoral how much is being spent, upwards of $180 million.
Lisa Savage, let me get to Lisa Savage on this same question. Who would you caucus with?
Thank you. And thank you for holding the debate. Thank you for our audience at home, and thank you, Maine Chamber of Commerce. It's an interesting question in my case because I was a Green Party member, but I unenrolled from the Green Party in order to gain ballot access because the restrictions are so severe in Maine to get on the ballot as a third party. However, if I win the election, I plan to re-enroll in the Green Party and enter the U.S. Senate as the first Green senator. I believe the rules as they stand now would not require me to caucus with either party because I would go in as a party member. I am focused on getting Medicare for all for the American people, and I will meet with, work with, collaborate with anyone who is interested in working on that project together, whether it's Bernie Sanders, whether it's people of the Republican Party. That is my top priority and why I'm asking voters to consider, if you want Medicare for all, single payer, universal health care, then you would want to rank me first to show that that is your intention.
Now we have a viewer question next, and it'll go first to Sara Gideon. Dick Alty of Southwest Harbor asks, will you contest the outcome of this election in court if you win a plurality but lose in the final ranked choice result? Speaker Gideon.
Thank you, Dick, for that question. I want to start by saying that I fully support ranked choice voting. In 2016, when it was passed at the ballot box, I did endorse it and was forced to continue to protect it as a legislator when there were repeated attempts to actually repeal the law. Now, I have full faith in our electoral system and how our voting will go, both through these weeks that voting has been open and on election day. And I plan on, unless there is some reason that is outstanding that shows that something has gone wrong, I would not plan to contest results. I would plan to accept them.
Max Linn, what about you?
You repeat the question for me?
Yeah, the question from a viewer, Dick Alty of Southwest Harbor. Will you contest the outcome of this election in court if you win a plurality but lose in the final ranked choice vote? Or tabulation?
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely not. I support ranked choice voting and taking ranked choice voting on a national basis for the simple fact is it gives the little guy a chance. What we face in Maine is the same challenges we face in America, and that is the establishment career politicians. We've heard this for the last 10 and 20 years that Mainers and Americans are sick and tired of politics as usual and careerism in politics. And so this is an excellent opportunity, not only with ranked choice voting, to vote for change first, which is me, and vote for Sara or Susan second. Keep in mind, it has never been clear the choice right now for change and a politician who's not a career politician, but a citizen legislator versus a career politician for the institutions that have raised now upwards of $180 million.
And Lisa Savage, I know you're a big supporter of ranked choice voting too.
Indeed, I am. It's an opportunity for voters to vote their values rather than their fears. We've heard a lot of fear mongering in this election, but I think that, Maine people deserve to be able to vote for the values that they care about. I certainly support this system, but at the same time, I don't think I am in favor of any frivolous lawsuits if it appears that the election was held in a fair and a reputable manner. I don't see why, for instance, Bruce Poliquin contested the election even though he lost fair and square, and the courts basically said to him, you don't have a case here. So, if there's real malfeasance in the election, of course I would challenge it. But if ranked choice voting does its job and expresses the will of the majority of Maine voters, then of course I would respect that outcome. And
Senator Collins, the question, would you contest the outcome of this election in court if you win a plurality on election night but lose in the final ranked choice tabulation?
I would not. Ranked choice voting's been upheld twice by the courts in Maine. Those are the rules that we have to play by. I think a fair system would be a true runoff where everyone got to vote twice, but that's not what we have in the state of Maine.
All right, the next question begins with Max Linn, and I want to ask you about this because you advocate eliminating outstanding student loan debt. Should college be free for all Americans, and perhaps should it be linked to military or other public service?
Absolutely. You know, right now we do have an economic crisis on our hands, and that's where I stand apart from all three other candidates. The bailouts, and I assure you this, the bailouts are going to be very detrimental to the middle class people in America, but we are in bailouts. The Republicans want bailouts, the Democrats want bailouts, so there is no conservative party of small government and fiscal responsibility. So since we are creating this debt and doing bailouts, I'm asking for student loan relief, which is a direct people bailout for over 45 million Americans. And of course, for Mainers, I'm saying we need money. I'm the only candidate saying we need $5,000 for every Maine family. And this goes to them direct because Maine has been affected more than any other state in the country. And of course, my $500 billion bailout for small businesses, which is very different than Susan's PPP program, which is loaded with abuse and corruption.
All right, Lisa Savage, do you support forgiving student loan debt and or free college for Americans?
I do support forgiving student loan debt. We have students coming out of community college in Maine with tens of thousands of dollars in debt and coming out of the University of Maine with hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think that public education should be tuition free. Wealthy countries invest in the education of their young people because we need doctors, engineers, teachers. I would also like to see the banks forgive the outstanding student loan that's out there now. Whichever legislators wrote the law so that student loans if a student has to declare bankruptcy at some point, they can't get out from under that loan, they should be ashamed of themselves. I will say that if someone wants to go to a private institution like Harvard, I think they can figure out how to pay for that. But yes, I do think that public higher education should be tuition free. And I favor fully funding education from pre-K, including childcare, all the way up through medical school. Many wealthy countries do this.
Senator Collins, what are your thoughts on student loan debt?
Well, first of all, I've worked very hard to expand Pell Grants, which go to our neediest students. I am the chief proponent, along with Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, of the TRIO programs like Upward Bound, which help first-generation students succeed in college. And I've also supported debt forgiveness for certain professions. If you go into public service or medical professions and practice in an underserved area. What I think would be really worth pursuing is allowing students to refinance their debt. Given that interest rates are so low now, that would save them a great deal of money. But I don't think it makes sense to allow a very wealthy family that is sending a son or daughter to the University of Maine or any other public school to go for free. That would just burden the taxpayers when they can afford to pay.
And Speaker Gideon, what are your thoughts on student loan debt?
Thank you. So first, money should not be a barrier to education. And also, debt should not be a barrier to young people being able to own their first home and get on their feet and afford health insurance. But today in America, it is. And that's why we do need to make changes. What I support are need-based grants that will help people gain a debt-free education. We've seen great examples of this happening here in Maine, both through our community college system and our university system over the past years. I also support making refinancing easier and basing that on both income level, but also on the kind of work that you are doing. And I also think we need to make incentives in order for public universities and community colleges to lower the cost of education. I just want to say lastly that I'm very proud of what we've done here in Maine. We've cracked down on predatory for-profit colleges. We've demanded transparency from lenders for students, and we've also thought about how we can give tax credits to students who decide to live and work in Maine.
Thank you. And this next round begins with Lisa Savage. Whoever wins the presidency is most likely going to propose a major transportation investment bill. With the company having gone trillions deeper in debt for COVID relief, can we afford a costly new infrastructure package?
I don't think we can afford to not do public transportation in a very vigorous way. The climate crisis is the biggest threat to all of our security and to the future of our grandchildren being able to live on this planet. So public transportation is a major way to cut down on our greenhouse gas emissions while and still allowing people to get to work, to get to school. And I think that investing in these kinds of systems is long overdue. We're decades behind most of the rest of the world in investing in public transport. So every time we have a war, nobody asks how we're going to pay for that. But when it's something like public transportation or Medicare for all, suddenly, how are we going to pay for it? We have plenty of money in this country. We just need better budget priorities.
Senator Collins, what are your infrastructure priorities in the next administration?
Well, first of all, I would point out that I chair the Transportation Appropriations Subcommittee in the Senate. And I've been able to bring back to Maine $740 million in much needed transportation improvements for our seaports, our airports, our roads, and our bridges. Maine ranks #1 on a per capita basis in the amount of money that it is getting from a very important transportation construction program. That is not a coincidence. But when we think of infrastructure, we need to broaden our thinking. We do need a major infrastructure package, but it's got to include rural broadband as well. We see in too many parts of our state that there are, especially as we're relying on people working from home more or being taught from home, that there are still these gaps in rural broadband. And that's why I've joined with Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia in a rural broadband bill that would help fill those gaps.
Thank you, Senator. Speaker Gideon, what are your priorities for infrastructure?
Yes. Well, it's nice when Susan and I agree on something, and I think this is one example where we do. Look, when we think about how we stage an economic recovery in this country, it is absolutely going to take an investment from the federal government and an investment in infrastructure. Now, without question, that means investing in our roads and bridges, something that we are behind on in this country and in this state. It also means an investment in broadband, making sure that we are actually putting into place this infrastructure that should already be here for this century, and that we are welcoming people to live, work, and study in Maine. But we need to go further than that. We can invest in infrastructure that helps us combat climate change. This can be in terms of our building projects. It can also be in terms of what those roads look like and in renewable energy projects. And I just want to say this is really where it matters who is in charge, because we have seen an absolute inability and no desire to tackle these issues from the Senate that is controlled by Mitch McConnell.
And Max Linn, what would you like to see happen, and can we afford it?
Well, this is where I feel I'm absolutely strongest, as we've heard about the biggest threat to our country and to our state. The fact is, the biggest threat, in my opinion, to our state and to our country is sending the same career politicians back to Washington again and again, hoping for change. Sara's been in government for 8 years. Susan's been actually 41 in Maine politics, 24 in the Senate. Why haven't they done anything yet? What are they going to, what they haven't done in 50 years, what are they going to do now? But the reality is Susan and Sara will have no say in Washington. They are the faceplates of the Republican and Democratic Party. That is part of my platform for real meaningful change and infrastructure money to the state and performance. You need someone from the outside. You need a citizen legislator that'll have the influence and the power to bring Maine what it needs. They can't do it because They're tied to a rigged and broken system. An election of Sara or Susan is simply a win for Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer. They'll be assigned to small little committees and won't have any say in really bringing home money to Maine. I will.
Thank you, sir. The next question is for Senator Collins. You've been telling voters that you're next in line to be chairman of the Appropriations Committee if the GOP keeps control of the Senate. How would that benefit Maine? Is it about chairs getting to funnel more money to their own states? Or as you might put it, some might put it, is it about bringing home the bacon?
Well, it is. Maine is not a wealthy state. We have a lot of needs in our state. And I think the work that I've already done on the Appropriations Committee shows why it's so important that I am now a senior member of that committee and in line to be its next chair. It has been since 1932 that a Maine senator was appointed chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, which is the most powerful position among the committees in the United States Senate. And does it make a difference? Well, I've already told you what I've been able to do in the transportation field, but let's look at my work on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. I have been able to secure funding for 2 new destroyers for Bath Iron Works that the Navy desperately needed, but were not included in the president's budget. I've been able to secure $320 million for infrastructure improvements at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. I could go
Senator,
on and on.
Speaker Gideon, this seems like a case where perhaps seniority matters. Do you agree?
Well, let's talk about that. I think it's important because Senator Collins does like to talk about 24 years in Washington. And of course, we are, as you mentioned, Pat, virtual tonight because the senator is in Washington. But let's ask ourselves what that really means. Because if Senator Collins does become the appropriations chair, it means that Mitch McConnell is still majority leader. And let's look back and remember what Mitch McConnell said when we last had a Democratic president. He said, let's make it our mission to make sure this is a one-term president, not let's make it our mission to actually make progress on issues that matter to people. And when we think about the lack of progress on lowering the cost of prescription drugs, the lack of progress on more COVID relief, these things Susan Collins is not able to actually get done. Even though she talks about her 24 years of experience, it doesn't seem to have an impact within her caucus. So I ask, what does that and how does that help the people in Maine?
Pat,
thank you, Speaker Gideon. Yes, Senator Collins.
I think I deserve a rebuttal on that one. And I would point out to Sara that I am in Washington. That's because we're in session. We're working. That is in sharp contrast to what Sara did at the state level, where she recessed the legislature in mid-March and has done absolutely nothing since then to respond to the COVID crisis that we have. In the meantime, we have passed in Washington $3 trillion worth of relief, including $1.25 billion that has gone to the state of Maine.
And Speaker Gideon, I want to let her have the last word on this.
Thank you very much. You know, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Senator Collins continues to want to deflect. It has been 6 months since the Senate has been able to pass any COVID relief. And whether we are thinking about families or individuals in Maine, whether we are thinking about our towns and cities, or whether we are thinking about the state and the vital services that are on the verge of being cut, that is a dangerous proposition. Now, I am proud of the work that we've done here in Maine and the fact that we have the lowest COVID rate, second lowest in the nation, and that our economy is recovering faster than any other state. But make no mistake, we still need help from the federal government.
Speaker Gideon, thank you. Max Linn, let's get back to the original question. The Senate seems to run on seniority. Isn't that important?
Right. Well, it is important, but the reality is I can list a dozen races throughout America where when the Republicans and or Democrats have been in trouble, they always bring in, oh, this person's in line to be this in charge of appropriations. Susan Collins is not going to be in charge of Appropriations Committee. And even if she was, by me being Maine's next U.S. Senator, I could bring much more money than she could ever bring. In fact, if Sara and Susan were both there together, me versus me, I would bring much more to Maine than they ever could, because I would be Maine's voice. And why the candidates are spending upwards of $180 million is because the balance of influence rests with Maine. If one of them wins, the Republican and Democrats take all the influence and power. With a victory here, Maine would remain all influential and have the call whether it's a Republican or Democratic administration. A vote for Susan and Sara is indeed a wasted vote. The power vote, the institutional power vote, is with me as your next U.S. Senator.
And Lisa Savage, your thoughts on this?
Well, I'd like to challenge the premise that it makes a great deal of difference whether we have Republican leadership or Democratic leadership in these key committees. Both parties take big money from corporate interests. You could go on opensecrets.org and see for yourself the very same corporations give both parties money. Sure, we have lots of bailouts for the corporations, for the already wealthy. The people are still waiting for a meaningful bailout. People got $1,200 once. Many people never got that. And we're still waiting for relief to communities. We're still waiting for people to really get help with their rent, with their mortgages. And I don't think that either one of the two corporate party candidates are going to change the influence of big money in Washington. You're going to have to elect an independent. If you go to my website, lisaformaine.org, you can see how I stand on the issues, and that I lack experience taking money from corporate lobbyists and writing legislation to benefit them. So if that's what the people of Maine want, they should rank me first.
This round begins with Speaker Sara Gideon. Tens of millions of dollars have been spent by your campaign and Senator Collins' campaign and your backers to tear each other down. And the winner is sure to be tainted when they go to work. Do you find this is dangerous to our democracy? And if this kind of money is bad, how would you change the system?
Yes, thank you for that question. I want to start with something that I think we all agree with, which is that there is too much money in politics and we need to make a change. That's why one of the first things that I did on this campaign was to introduce ideas for reform. That includes something we've talked about before, Pat, making sure that we overturn Citizens United, because corporations don't have a voice, people do. Also making sure that we are making transparent exactly who is contributing what money and what their goals are. In other words, making sure that people can understand where that dark money is coming from. And also doing things like making sure that members of Congress can never become lobbyists and have an inside track on the system. I also want to point out that in this campaign, I made the choice to accept no corporate PAC money directly from a corporate PAC. And that's important because people need to know who we're standing for. And I stand for Mainers.
Max Linn, you've talked about your feelings about this kind of money coming into Maine, but what do you do about it? How do you fix it?
Well, what you do is you have to vote for citizen legislators. Maine has an opportunity to send such a strong message to Washington and the nation that they're tired of this ridiculous rant that Speaker Gideon just said. They've raised upwards of $200 million doing worthless ads, just attacking each other. They've said all these flyers, tens of thousands of flyers, $200 million. Think of what that could have done for Mainers. And that's calling Sara Gideon, saying she's for reform. She's part of the broken system. I'm sure she's a very nice candidate, but she's part of the broken system. I care about Mainers. They're losing their homes. They're losing their medical care. They have to decide between the electric bill, their food bill, and their gas bill. This is a critical time for Maine to send a message to Washington to say, we're tired of the same old, same old. We're going to reject your money. We're going to reject you paying to buy our vote. We're going to send an independent candidate to Washington and shake up the industry, shake up the system, and shake up the country.
Thank you, sir. Lisa Savage, how do you deal with this kind of money and the influence it has? And it's clearly deeply frustrating to voters.
Well, I practice what I preach in that I don't accept corporate lobbyist money or corporate super PAC money. I am a school teacher. I just retired from 25 years. I was a small business owner in Central Maine before that. My husband is a self-employed woodworker. I'm the only non-millionaire in this race. And I'm not saying that it's bad to be a millionaire. What I'm saying is I don't think millionaires can understand what working people are struggling with and what their needs are. They just can't. They're in a bubble of affluence and wealth. Taking tens of millions of dollars from outside Maine and running negative advertising that frankly is bad for children to see. Children now think that that's what amounts to political debate, and it isn't. This is a real political debate where we talk about our ideas, we're respectful of each other, and we let voters, draw their conclusions based on what they hear us say. Taking tens of millions of dollars to flood the market with advertising of all types is not in the best interest of democracy, in my opinion.
Senator Collins, in Maine, over the last 30, 40 years, we've all seen fierce partisanship, but we've never really seen a campaign quite like this one. How do you fix it?
That's for sure. And I would point out that there have been 16 independent fact checks of Sara's ads and those of her allies that have been deemed false or mostly false. And I think it's disgraceful. This is the first campaign I've ever been involved in where my opponent has attacked my integrity and distorted and outright lied about my record. And I think that is totally unacceptable. We do need full disclosure of dark money groups. There are all sorts of dark money groups flooding funds into the state of Maine. And I would point out that Sara's received more contributions from Portland, Oregon than she has from Portland, Maine. So what I don't think the answer is what Sara has proposed, and that is amending the First Amendment. The First Amendment has not been amended or changed in any way since it was adopted in 1791. But we can have full disclosure of all donors.
Thank you, Senator Collins. We have a question from a viewer now. This is from Kevin from Holden, who asks for a yes or no response from each of you, but I'm sure you'll be able to elaborate after that. And we begin with Max Linn. Do you believe that health care is a human right, yes or no?
Yes, healthcare is very important. That's why on my platform I do a hybrid system, which is a combination of government, so people are not left out. Under no condition should people lose their home or their savings over healthcare. No question about it. But you can't just go universal healthcare because it already takes a bankrupt nation and bankrupts it more. And also, we talk about political reform. I find it almost hysterical to sit here and watch Susan and Sara say political financial reform when they are the heart of the problem. Maine has a chance to send a message, and we can do it with a vote for an independent candidate.
Lisa Savage, back to healthcare. The question: do you believe healthcare is a human right?
Yes, definitely. I don't think the words for profit and healthcare belong in the same sentence together. Not every human activity is appropriate for profit. Healthcare should not have been turned into a commodity. That's why our healthcare in this country is vastly more expensive than it is around the world, because it's the profit motive is in there. So I definitely want to move in the direction of a Medicare for all, an improved Medicare for all that covers mental health, dental, vision, hearing, and that people can count on, and that they don't have to worry about going bankrupt. Most bankruptcies are caused by medical bills, and most of those people had for-profit health insurance. So,
Senator Collins, is health care a human right?
Yes, it is. And there's so much that we could do to expand healthcare coverage and lower the cost, and lowering the cost is really key. There are several actions we can take. One is to have much more transparency in the system. That is so important so that people can compare prices. There's nothing more opaque than the cost of healthcare. Second, we can lower the cost of prescription drugs. I've already written 2 laws that are helping to do just that, but there's much more that can be done, such as putting a cap on the out-of-pocket costs for seniors under the Medicare Part D program. We also have to work on accessibility. After all, if you live in an area of the state where there are not a lot of healthcare providers, we need access to more telemedicine, and we need to preserve our rural hospitals. And that's where Sara's plan really worries me, because I believe, based on a study that I've seen, that 15 out of our 36 hospitals would go under her public option plan.
All right, thank you, Senator. And Speaker Gideon, is health care a human right?
Thank you, Pat. Healthcare is a human right. You know, just last week, I was speaking to a woman from Litchfield. She's 59 years old. She had just lost her job and her health care. And she was crying because she was scared. And she is scared because right now, Republicans are trying to take our health care away, even during the course of a pandemic. It's something that Mitch McConnell has been determined to do for the last 4 years, and that Susan Collins has helped him do with her vote on the tax bill. Now in Maine, we made sure that we protected those same people who are put at risk with pre-existing conditions. And in the Senate, you can be sure that I will lead on this issue. I believe we need to create a public option that allows anybody to buy into Medicare who wants to do it, but also that allows Medicare to do things that the federal government should be able to do, like negotiate directly with pharmaceutical companies to lower the cost of prescription drugs. But the last thought I want to leave people with is this: there is no plan from these Senate Republicans who have been determined to overturn the Affordable Care Act. There is, by Senator Collins' own admission, no plan to replace it. We cannot afford to reelect Susan Collins or Mitch McConnell as majority leader.
Pat,
Yes, Senator.
if I may.
Go ahead. Yes.
If I
and we'll hear from Lisa after that.
Okay. Pat, I was the first Republican to speak out against repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And it was I who cast the deciding vote to save it. So what Sara said is just not accurate. And I don't know anyone in the Senate who is not for protecting people with pre-existing conditions. That's an issue that I worked on long ago, before Sara even moved to the state of Maine.
I want to hear Lisa Savage weigh in on this too again.
Yes, I feel that talking about things like transparency and costs of health care, or adding a public option to the Unaffordable Care Act, is avoiding the issue. What we're talking about is the fact that people can't afford health care. I would also like to note that if we had universal health care in the form of Medicare for all, this would be a great boon to our business community, both small businesses and big corporations. This would help our economy if we could get our health care on the footing that the rest of the world is on.
We want to shift gears for a minute now. Each of you will have a chance to ask a question of one of your opponents. Same time limits apply. Lisa Savage, we'll start with you.
I have a question for Sara Gideon. Sara, the polls have you leading this race, and they also show that one of the top issues for voters is health care. We know the Republicans don't have a serious plan to improve health care. I support Medicare for all, as do the majority of Mainers, and studies show Medicare for all is the best way to provide world-class universal health care to everyone while spending less than we do now. Your plan of expanding the Affordable Care Act would not cover everyone and would not cost less than we're paying now. So my question is this: shouldn't Mainers who want Medicare for all rank me first and rank you second?
Speaker Gideon.
Thank you, Lisa, for your question. And Lisa, I want to start by saying thank you for bringing this issue to the forefront every time that we debate and everywhere on the campaign trail, because healthcare, without question, is the most important issue to people, no matter where I have been in this state, not only during the course of this campaign, but during my time as speaker. It is what people tell me we need to work on. Now, I think you and I have the same goals, making sure that everybody has access to healthcare they can afford, but we do have different approaches to getting there. I think a public option allows people to buy into a system and to improve a healthcare system at the same time. But it does also allow those who have and want to keep their own private insurance to be able to do so, a right that I think is important to keep in place. Now, in addition to that public option, I think we need to make a lot of changes to the Medicare system as well. I mentioned the one regarding the cost of prescription drugs.
Speaker Gideon, time is up on that answer. Thank you. Senator Collins, a question from you.
I have a question for Sara. Sara, you say that you don't take corporate PAC money, but as speaker, you took money from 16 different drug and insurance companies. You held a fundraiser at your home at which their lobbyists and executives came. You've also taken money directly from corporations, not just their PACs. You were caught inappropriately reimbursing yourself from your own PAC. You've raised more than $1 million from corporate executives. It's the hypocrisy that bothers Mainers. How can you say one thing and do another?
So let's talk about exactly what corporate PAC money is. First of all, I want to go back to my record in the State House, because what you can see is that over and over again, I took on healthcare companies. I took on the drug and insurance companies. I took on the oil and gas companies, making sure that we rolled up our sleeves, cracked down on pharmaceutical companies, demanded transparency, and also created the importation of prescription drug programs. That we took on the healthcare industry, for example, capping the copay of insulin at $35 for a 30-day period. Now, that's not what we have seen you do, Senator Collins, where you have taken $6 million from corporate PACs and then done the bidding of exactly these industries. When I decided to run for this race, when I decided not only to run for the Senate, but if I was going to be a senator, I decided to make a promise that I was going to reject all corporate PAC money in this race and into the future as a senator. And that's what you can count on, because people need to know where I stand.
I'm going to move on. It's your turn to ask a question of someone.
Thank you very much. My question is for Susan. Susan, in the past 3 years, you have been either the deciding or the key vote on issues that are very important to Americans, whether that was the vote for Justice Kavanaugh, whether that was the vote for the 2017 Trump tax bill that gave a $2 trillion tax cut to corporations, or whether that was the vote that has allowed this Affordable Care Act lawsuit to proceed. My question for you, Susan, is which of these votes do you regret the most?
Well, I don't regret any of those votes because you've misrepresented those votes. I was the deciding vote to keep the Affordable Care Act in 2017, as you well know. And in fact, the Democrats right now are using my arguments to defend the law before the Supreme Court. So I'm proud of my record. I have been named the most bipartisan member of the Senate in the past 7 years. That is not a claim that you could make, Sara, because you always follow the party line. I think we need more bipartisanship, and that is what I'm known for in Washington. That is what I've always done, is to try to bring people together. I was thinking about the ads that you're running saying that I supported 181 far-right judges. Well, the fact is 84% of those judges were confirmed with bipartisan support, and more than 100 of them had the support of Angus King. So I guess
Senator Collins.
Angus voting far right.
Thank you for that.
Pat, do I get a rebuttal?
No, actually,
it's my turn.
No, Max Linn gets to ask a question now.
I'm going to ask Sara. We're picking on Sara tonight, but it's amazing to see this catfight between Sara and Susan. Maine deserves better. Maine needs someone who cares. So, Sara, I have a question. On your website, you oppose President Trump's wall on the southern border. Facts and statistics show that the wall is stopping human trafficking and the drug trade. Why do you oppose this?
So let's talk about immigration, because this is one of the great failings, in fact, of this president. Whether we think about the fact that he has tried to divert money intended for the military in order to build his wall, or whether we think about the fact that it was reported just yesterday that more than 500 children who were separated from their parents, those parents can no longer be found to reunite with their children. We need to do better. We need a fair immigration policy in this country that recognizes a path to citizenship that people can follow. And we need to do it in a way, yes, absolutely, that keeps Americans safe and secure at the same time. But right now, that is not what we see happening. And that is something that I do want to work on in the Senate.
We have just 2 minutes left until our closing statements. Time does fly. So I want to ask you, what is something you admire about your opponent? Senator Collins, let me ask you first.
I admire about all three of my opponents that they're willing to serve the public. Uh, that is something that I think we need more of in this country, and the fact that each one of them is willing to step forward and do the hard work of earning the votes of the people of Maine is commendable.
Speaker Gideon, what about you?
Thank you. I want to say two things that I admire about Lisa. First, the fact that she dedicated her life to teaching, and I want to say thank you for that. Thank you for being a public school teacher. I also want to thank her for staying so focused on the issues that matter most to her, issues around climate and around healthcare, which I think are exactly the worries that people here in Maine and across this country have as well.
And Max Linn, something you admire about your opponents?
Well, I admire Lisa Savage because both Lisa and I hold the same thing, that Maine deserves better in Washington. They deserve an independent voice and someone who really cares about Mainers versus the establishment. And with Sara and Susan, I respect them as candidates, but I don't, it's hard to respect that the rigged system they're in, bringing in not millions of dollars, but hundreds of millions of dollars to buy Mainers' votes. So I respect them as individuals, but I can't respect the party and the ongoing doublespeak that they give to Mainers. Mainers need someone who cares in Washington.
And finally, Lisa Savage, something you admire about your opponents?
I admire that everyone's willing to come and participate in debates repeatedly because it's great role modeling for the children that are watching to be able to see adults caring enough about our world to take the risk of being, we don't know what questions we're going to be asked before we come here. Someone might criticize us or trip us up. I think it's very brave of everyone to do this, and I love that students of all ages are watching and saying, gee, that could be me someday.
Thank you, Lisa Savage. We've come to the closing statements now. Each candidate has 1 minute, and we are going to begin with Lisa Savage.
Yes, I'm going to, I'd like to tell you about Hamdia Ahmed. She's a 22-year-old former refugee and currently an activist with Black Lives Matter Maine. And I am going to do something a little unusual here that we're often asked to do, and that is to lift up marginalized voices. I'm inviting Hamdia to come right in here and share about the fight against institutional and systemic racism. So please join me in welcoming Hamdia Ahmed.
My name is Hamdia Ahmed. Before I begin my speech, I would like to remind everyone that we live on sacred land. This land belongs to Indigenous people. We live in a country where Black people are being hunted down by the police on a daily basis. We live in a country where the president refuses to condemn white supremacy. Black people are being murdered by the police on a daily basis. The same people who are condemning rioting should be condemning the pain that is being inflicted on Black people on a daily basis. We need justice.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to have to interrupt, but we have to get to all of our closing statements. Senator Susan Collins.
I fight hard for Maine every day, even in the midst of a pandemic. When I use my seniority to get an extra destroyer for BIW or a bridge that is essential to Madawaska, I do so because it is what Maine needs. A columnist once criticized me for working too hard on what he deemed as the small issues. But if you are a 77-year-old pastor from Dresden who fell prey to a scam and ended up in a Spanish prison, or if your sister in Blue Hill has a rare form of cancer and cannot find a doctor, or if you're a mother in West Enfield who can't hear her child without cochlear implants, those problems don't seem small to you at all. I've been a leader on some of the biggest issues facing our nation, but it's helping Mainers like these that keep me going and that make me fight hard for Maine each and every day.
Senator Collins, thank you very much. Max Linn, the closing statement.
And to the voters at home watching, we all have a choice before us, a serious and sober choice that will dictate how we move forward as a state and as a nation. The voting families of Maine have a choice between candidates who serve as the custodians of decline with their continued bailout of Wall Street, support of open borders, and ignoring the needs of our rural areas versus me, a job creator, someone who understands the economy and who actually gives a damn about the many hurting Maine families. By ranking me first in this election, the voting families of Maine can invest in a candidate who cannot be paid off by Wall Street or never bend his knee to the globalists who hate our families, our nation, and our way of life. May God continue to bless our state and our great nation.
Thank you, Max Linn. And finally, a closing statement from Sara Gideon.
Thank you. Mainers, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me for the past 16 months to your communities and to your homes and to your businesses, to sit on your porches or under your barn and to talk and to listen. What I remember from these conversations is Shannon. I remember being on your lobster boat with your 2 young sons who are ready to become the next generation of lobstermen. I remember Hannah and the story you told me about the importance of having Planned Parenthood and Maine Family Planning and Title X funding available to help you when that was the only health care that you had. And Mary, I remember you as I was checking out with my 13-year-old daughter from Hannaford with an overflowing basket of groceries, and you asked me, what are we going to do about Social Security? Well, this race is about you. It is about making sure you are represented. And if there is one thing that you can know, it is that I will fight for you and stand by you in the same way that I have in the State House for all of these years. Thank you.
Sara Gideon, thank you very much. That wraps up our Voice of the Voter debate. Our thanks to all of the candidates for being willing to stand in the arena and try to serve the public. We also thank the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and our thanks to you for watching tonight. For all of us at News Center Maine, I'm Pat Callaghan. Good night.
Here's what you can expect to see live today on C-SPAN. First, a short House pro forma session at 11:30 Eastern. This afternoon, Vice President Mike Pence